How to Share What You Know with Daniel Markham.
The Azure DevOps podcast is a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Each show brings you hard-hitting interviews with industry experts, innovating better methods, and sharing success stories. Listen on to learn how to increase quality, ship quickly, and operate well. And now your host, Jeffrey Palermo.
Welcome to the show. I'm Jeffrey Palermo, your host for helping you and your teams move fast, deliver quality, and to run your system with confidence in Azure, all while using everything the .NET ecosystem has to offer. This podcast is sponsored by ClearMeasure, a software architecture company that empowers .NET teams to be self-sufficient and able to deliver world-class results. ClearMeasure is hiring. They're hiring architects as well as .NET engineers who'd like a path to become an architect. So you can go to clearmeasure.com/careers for that. And today we're going to be talking a little bit of a meta topic about software in general, but learning and sharing what you've learned. Our guest today is Daniel Markham. He's a repeat guest on the show. He's a semioticist, logician, otherwise known as a programmer, if you can pronounce that. And he likes to help people learn to make better tech. He believes that once you know the why, you can figure out the what on your own. And as an active coder and manager, Daniel spent time the last several years with clients as an Agile and extreme programming technical coach, helping them rediscover how to discover and create value at speed. His clients include several Fortune 100 companies all over North America, and he's a technical coach and author of InfoOps and InfoOps 2, cross-dedicated and shared due to high cost and low availability hardware systems. Package management and high layer orchestration through other tools, layers, is where Azure is partially interesting to him, but he has gone across so many technologies across the years. And we had a great interview last time on the Azure DevOps podcast, September of 2020. So Daniel, welcome back to the show. How are you, sir?
Howdy, Jeffrey. It's good to be back on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. I would encourage the listeners to go back and listen to the previous episode. But for the folks who haven't and have found the podcast since then, and maybe haven't heard you speak or heard your online shows and contents and videos, I was like to give you an opportunity to give the high points of your background and your career that kind of led you up to what are you doing today?
Well, basically, I'm a specializing generalist or a generalizing specialist, depending on how you want to look at it. Done a lot of stuff, a lot of different tech over the years. I got interested in helping teams do pretty good. I kind of promoted my way out of senior dev roles into architect and lead architect, that kind of stuff. And just wanted to figure out, how is it that we create good tech sometimes? And sometimes it really screws up. And got out and did a lot of consulting, saw a lot of different organizations, and wanted to take that and sort of put it in some sort of piece of work that I could share with folks about how they could make their teams more successful. And that's sort of been my journey the last few years. I wrote a couple books. I've been doing podcasting, doing a lot of outreach, having a hoot and hell of a time with my friends. And it's been quite an adventure.
Nice. Now we've got to pitch your website, which it's been a lot, building up quite a bit. DanielBMarkham.com. What do you have on there?
That's correct. It's DanielBMarkham.com. B as in boy. I have gone through about a dozen different types of blogging content creation platforms. I used to tell people, at heart, I really am a writer. I'm a writer who could program very well, had a sort of a natural skill at programming. And so even though my heart was in writing, my skill level sort of took me off to the programming world. And that's been fun. I've enjoyed it. But over the last 30, 40 years, I have tried all sorts of different stuff. So about 14 months ago or so, I did DanielBMarkham.com, set it up as an AWS CC2 instance. A lot of technical choices in why I did it that way. And I've been, posting at least once a week. I do a nerd roundup every Friday where we just sit back and talk about tech news and goof off. I try to make the website and the nerd roundup as non-commercial as possible. So there's really no sponsor agenda. We're just, I think that teams that can relax and have fun together can do about dang near anything together. So I think it's important to demonstrate kicking back and just talking about what's going on in the tech world without any sort of ulterior agenda. I kicked off a Discord server a while back. been doing a lot of creative stuff.
When you were on the show last time, we talked specifically about how to teach programmers what they need to know, but then also how to teach them those things. We talked about test-driven development, but you have a particular take on teaching yourself. You have this, I see this passion for teaching, and you've done a lot of work with the videos and the website. There's probably a lot of people out there who kind of would like to teach, but they just don't even know how to get started, and see all these YouTube people doing product reviews. And it's like, man, I'd like to do something more meaningful or whatnot. But there's kind of maybe some barriers. You've been through that journey, but at the beginning, when did you know that you wanted to teach others and wanted to share what you had learned?
I tell you, it's an interesting question. As a writer, I wanted to describe the experiences I had as a lead programmer and as an architect. How did I go through these different stories and these different customers, how different the answers. And I found that telling that story got rather interesting. That there was one side of that story was just consisting of sort of little nucleuses of technology, such as relational databases or UML. And there was another side of that story, was a much more free-flowing part, which is like, okay, you meet these guys who all speak a different language. How do you determine what the requirements are? And programming brought together both of those worlds, and it became quite fascinating to describe that. So I found that I got into this doing the technical side of teaching, which is TDD or C programming or C# programming, which was fairly straightforward. You just go down a list of features and you talk about how the features are used. But then as I got more mature in teaching, I picked tougher and tougher subjects to try to teach. And that just got dang hard to do. And that even made it even more fun for me because I'm a sucker for pain like that, I guess. I don't know why. This is why I'm a programmer. I don't give up on problems because they're hard.
So you've done, man, I'm just perusing your website. You have so many videos and you have a really interesting list of guests, but what are the mechanics? You're putting yourself on top of a screen. You've kind of built out a studio for yourself so that you can do that. Do you know of a guide today where you can just, follow the recipe, or did you have to slog through it all and just figure it out on your own like everybody else?
Just slogging through. Yeah, I'm not trying to name drop, but I am friends with Bob Martin, Uncle Bob, as known in the community. And Bob told me, he said, when I started, I just got my phone out and made a video. And silly me, I tried doing that, and I just sucked. The MIDI was bouncing everywhere. You couldn't see the sound. It was so then I went to the other side. I got the Adobe suite and started doing, I guess, what we call video production, where you shoot from different angles, and then you do the sound effects and the special and all that. And I could do that. Matter of fact, I love doing that, but it was so full of little things to do and tweak and whatever that I found myself more involved in the technical details, the presentation, the actual content. So I had these like wonderful 4-camera setups with this green screen, and I did all this really cool stuff. And it was, I loved, as a tech guy, I loved doing that, but it was not related to that. It was just, at the end of the day, it was a distraction. So I found personally, I had to do a lot of experimentation to run really forward.
And what did you settle on, or have you even settled?
Well, it's a process. I was told when I started the most important thing was audio. So of course, the last stupid thing I could finally get done was audio, but it wasn't for lack of trying. I tried it this several times. I have at least a dozen different kinds of microphones. Oh, wow. I'm using a shotgun mic now. I've got, of course, mics on the PC. I've got a mic on the webcam I'm using. I got mics, and I have mixer boards. I'm using a hardware mixer now. But
which one?
Various forms.
Which one?
The Behringer. It's it's like a 12 or 14 channel hardware mixer with the sliders. One of the things I discovered, that because I love technical details so much, and because all the technical stuff just sort of went into the monitor here in front of me, that the more I could offload the cognitive part of like tweaking stuff to some other thing, the more I was sort of willing to focus on what I was doing. And so I moved from let's sort of shoot video as if we were doing a movie, shoot and you process. Now I'm doing a TV show kind of format. I use OBS or one of the derivatives. The metaphor is, hey, I show up, I push the button, we start working, and I don't fret through the stuff. And then when we're done, I may spend some time fretting through the stuff, but I try to focus exclusively on kind of the content, what we're doing, instead of all the other cool stuff I would do if I had time.
Gotcha. And you said you had a boom microphone. Which one have you picked?
Oh, it's I have to get back to it. It is a shotgun mic. I got it off Amazon. It had the highest rating. I also have a wonderful tube mic somewhere. I had the Yeti Blue I used for a while. Let me see. See, this is it's right here.
Audio Technica
AT875R.
Okay, AT75R. So that's interesting. Yeah, because I can't see it in your shot. You get to be a little bit further away with the boom microphone, and it still picks you up really great. So you have more freedom of movement. Whereas, for this podcast, I'm using a Audio Technica AT 2020, I think is this one. I have another one that's 2040, the same line. But that requires me to be within a few inches of it at all times. If I back away like this, it really affects the volume of the audio. So it's just, there's so many different types of microphone. They work differently.
Well, it's true. And I am in quite a small room here. It's about an 8x8 or 10x20. It's a very small room. And what I found with the sort of presentation style microphones was that my voice would bounce off the wall and bounce back, and I would get more of a sort of interior of a cave type thing. And it was quite annoying. With the shotgun mic, by moving it off center, I can actually shoot through the scene out the door into the hallway, which prevents the echoes from being such a big deal.
Oh, good point. Good point. And you're also showing stuff on video, or this podcast is just audio. So what's your chosen format for actually getting it up on a video, and what do you show?
Oh, wow. That's just, the video part's just as cool as the audio part. With video, I went through several different solutions about that. I'm fine now. I'm using a Sony regular point and shoot camera. I think the R100 or R1000 series. I'm using the latest one of those. Beautiful, wonderful little compact pickup, shoot pictures, shoot video, but I'm not using it for any of that. I'm plugging it right to an HDMI adapter and shooting directly from it. It handles the autofocusing, the qualities, all the most of the coding is done on the camera. So it's a nice little push the button and it works. I leave it on all the time. It seems to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
And from the HDMI output of the camera, I'm going into an NDI NewTek adapter, which turns the HDMI into something called NDI, which is a standardization for streaming over any Ethernet. And so my video goes out to my local Ethernet from the camera, which allows me to hook up any number of cameras anywhere, as long as I have that adapter. And then on this side, I subscribe to the and I can do the mixing and stuff on the software itself.
So you're getting multiple camera feeds in from your network connection.
Yes. I could probably go up to, I bet 10 or 12 on like a 10 gig connection. It's a lot of bits moving around, but nobody really cares because it's my home network.
Right. And what speed is your network switch?
Well, so that's a little different. So I moved up from basically climbing a tree and sending a carrier pigeon off USB sticks. In the last year or two, I've moved up to, I think it's called WiMAX. It's sort of a 5 gigahertz connection up to a local mountain. Puts me about somewhere around, I think 10 up, 30 down. It varies quite a bit. It's mostly a very crappy connection, to be honest with you. So when I do this, like we're doing today, I make sure that this is the only client on that outgoing segment. And then I have, like any nerd, of course, I've subnetted the system. And so the stuff we talked about, with the camera is actually on the RJ45 regular Cat 8.
Within your house, is it just a 1 gigabit switch, or are you on a 10 gigabit switch?
It's just a 1 gigabit switch. I would like to go 10 gig. I don't really need, I'm not like shooting the Super Bowl, so I'm fine. And I try not to push any of those video bytes over the Wi-Fi because physics. You can't. Physics just going to limit you. So I use the hardwire for these, and I have, as most of us do, of course, I have RJ45 jacks in all of my rooms in my house.
Well, that's really interesting. You got 1 gigabit switch. Well, I think a lot of people have the 1 gigabit switch. It's pretty popular now. But you've got all of the video running across that instead of having to pull them all into a switcher. So really, it's just the software that's grabbing the video feeds on your computer.
That's correct. And if you've ever used the media player VLC, VLC also for Windows has an NDI adapter. So I can like play music or karaoke on another box in the house and broadcast that video and audio through along with the camera stuff. So then I've got a separate feed for like background music or however I want to do that. So it becomes a plug and play type audio video system instead of just being a, hey, let's stick all everything we can to one spot type thing.
Okay. And once it's on your computer, where does it go then?
Well, I told you I used ODS. I sort of fudged a little bit. I actually use Extreme Broadcaster, which is the paid version of the ODS software. So it's pretty much the same concept. But I have that set up. I have it set up with 10 scenes. I've done titling. I've got background stuff. I can show you here. I know you, sorry, apologies to listeners, but for instance, for my going away at the end of my podcast, I've got this ray trace thing where a book rotates around and there's all, I mean, it's just, you can tell from my previous comments. Yeah, I love the tech stuff.
Well, I think all the videos on your website, pretty much a demonstration of every technique that you tend to use. So for listeners who want to go to danielbmarkham.com, they can kind of see all the effects that you put in there.
I keep looking for the magic sauce. I talked about this journey about trying to explain how to solve problems technically for people. And I keep sort of like Ponce de Leon looking for the fountain of youth. I keep trying to, maybe if I just did a green screen with turtles, maybe that. And so I'm constantly sort of tweaking the way I present things in an effort to try to get the better message across.
Well, that's a fascinating topic in and of itself. My next question was going to be, how do you choose what to teach, what to share, and how do you prioritize? Because I imagine you could create a list a mile long and then you never get through, but then you got to prioritize something to be first.
I am my own worst enemy, my friend. We've met the enemy. He is us. Most of us who are part of autodidacts are the type of people who could pick up a dozen projects and not finish them. And I spent some time in my early career doing that. I'm interested in something for a while and stopping. So when I did this Nerd Roundup weekly podcast, I thought, I have got to find a way to fight my own predilection, for diving in on 100 things and not finishing them. And what I decided on was this News of the Week concept where I just bookmark things, interesting tech articles as I come across them, put it on a Google Sheet, and then whoever wants to have like a dozen friends, it's an open door. Whoever wants to come by, look at the list, and we just talk about that as a way of scoping things down. Now, my belief, and by the way, it's turning out to be true, my belief is that the content for those things really don't matter that much. So if you can provide a forum, if you can provide the right people sort of participating in the right way, then you'll naturally drift into more interesting tech topics to cover. So we did testing recently. You've done social media, done all sorts of cool and interesting things, but that's because we had the people in the right sort of attitude, willing to take on any problem.
Nice. Well, there's so many new programmers every day getting into the industry. What do you find that they need to know above all else that just maybe the education system, you don't see it commonly taught?
Really bad jokes. You should, once you learn the bad joke thing. If you could tell a bad joke, you got a shot at this thing.
Well, I am a father of 3 and I tell them all, I keep all of my dad jokes in my dad base.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. I've decided every week to lead off with a nerd joke. Like, hear about the programmer who got fired? That's right, because he couldn't get a raise. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. When you're, and I say that half kiddingly, because I think it's important to be able to think of things sideways. And too many times we don't do that. Too many times we just we're giving these, you're going to use this architecture, this language. You're giving this customer now. With all these constraints, go solve the problem. And if you can tell a bad joke, or if you can just joke about anything, then you can take a topic to rotate it around a little bit and say, wait a minute, if I remove this constraint, this actually becomes quite easy to solve. And so then you can ask better questions and do better work for people.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I heard a going the other day, just kind of ragging on European countries and how Switzerland is, the worst, although their flag is a plus.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
For those who don't know, their flag literally is a plus. But they're a great country, just for you Swiss.
Oh, yeah. Well, that knife they got, that knife they have, they're prepared to do about dang near anything. Open cans, they got like a little microscope. They're ready for. Now the Navy, nothing. The Swiss Army's got the cool knife, but the Swiss Navy, nothing.
Can't open
this
it.
Makes you wonder. Yeah.
Nice.
So yeah, I do think that joking is an important thing to do because I think it's important to be able to step outside the constraints you're given. I find over and over again that we're really quite good at teaching tech. We're really quite good at teaching sort of the details of a various language or platform. And then programmers leave that learning environment and go into a sort of a solutions environment, hopefully. And when they're given constraints by the users or the product owner, whoever, they don't really think through why those are there because they weren't required to do that back in school.
Mm-hmm.
And so we poorly prepare programmers to actually figure out, like, why am I actually doing this? Because if I know why, I can probably do it a lot better. We talk about this in my bio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had actually an old professor of mine who still a friend to this day, but I took like 4 different computer courses from him when I was going through university years. And I remember him saying, you need to finish your software. There's a lot of people out there that don't finish their software, and it requires them for the software to keep running.
I did my second InfoOps book. It was more, I can go clean code, like, Craftsman. There's all these things we use as far as programmers, but I mean, just what is good or bad? And I decided that there was something that I'd never heard of before called good enough programming. And good enough programming is I solved a problem, I created value, I walked away from the code, and I never have to look at it again.
And it's still working.
That's good enough. And I find that we have a lot of people trying to be perfect programmers who have no experience of being good enough programmers. And that's a problem the industry's had for a long time.
Many thanks to our podcast sponsor, ClearMeasure. ClearMeasure is a software architecture company that empowers clients' development teams to be self-sufficient, moving fast, delivering quality, and running their systems with confidence. Whether starting a new project or developing new technologies or techniques, ClearMeasure sets up your team to deliver world-class results. Learn more at www.clearmeasure.com. ClearMeasure, empowering software delivery.
Yeah, I've worked with so many teams that have used the Scrum notion of a backlog, and the backlog becomes a mile long, and then it makes them feel bad that they haven't gotten to all these things. This psychological thing and this pressure to pull more things through instead of realizing, we had a bunch of ideas, but I think we're done.
One of the things I talked about in the first book is that whatever your team is doing, you should be able to have the entire backlog in your head at one time. And that naturally limits how big the backlog can be, but it also gives you the entire problem that you should be worried about instead of just the thing in front of you. And so any team member should be able to sit down and, 10, 20, 30 items, just sort of sketch out 80% accurate list of what they're trying to do in that team.
Well, that's an interesting philosophy. It makes me think of all the arguments and the hand-wringing over microservices versus monolith applications and how big should an application be, but that's an interesting rule of thumb that constraints are liberating.
Yeah, they are very much so. Oh my goodness, talk about microservices. I have been through the belly of the beast, my friend. I have gone through the microservices jungle. I fought the lizards and the dinosaurs, and they attacked me with flamethrowers, and I reached a conclusion with microservices, and that is, and you guys can kind of gird your loins here, typing systems, strong typing systems are only useful in the terms of one particular business feature at one time.
Business feature.
Yes, as an architect, oh my God, I want to make these class hierarchies and I want them to go everywhere, and I wanted to define all these concepts, and all of that was bullshit. I'm sorry, pardon my French, but it just was, because whatever concept I'm trying to work with really only has meaning inside delivering value to an external user right now for this particular feature. So that naturally limits your microservices to things that do useful things for the business. If your business isn't having a conversation about them, they should not be microservices. It also puts all sorts of other constraints. For instance, data moving between microservices should not be tight, because if you're tight, then you're actually trying to make universal decisions. So I tossed a whole bunch of stuff out that I believed wholeheartedly for many, many years. And I'm a happier person now. And it's funny because once you get to that point where you're just using strong typing for a particular feature, then whether it's a microservice or not, it's just a compilation decision. You can compile the same set of microservices into a monolith. And then once you realize that, you're like, okay, well, wow, I've actually been making my life much more complicated by making this compilation decision before I began coding, in this case, that I'm going to do a monolith. Whereas had I just went the right way all along, it really doesn't matter how many servers it goes to or whether it's in one big piece or another, all that stuff should not matter. Not part of the solution.
You said a couple of really interesting things I want to attempt to parse a little bit. For the first one I heard that jumped out was, if the business isn't talking about it, it shouldn't be a microservice. And I'll translate that. It shouldn't be an autonomous, gosh, I can't talk, an independent service.
Right.
And whereas, there's a lot of times teams will segment a system into multiple different Git repositories, each one having its own process and deployment, totally different. But it wasn't a business need for that segmentation. It was just, they decided, let's segment this little job off to this and the processor of this type of event. And you're saying that the architecture should follow the business language or how the business thinks about that feature.
That is correct. I think that
I like that.
Another way of saying that is that the platform and the language choice should actually tell the business something it didn't know before. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you're in some large system and somebody says, hey, we want to issue customers refunds. And I've got this stream that's got some customer stuff in. I've got the stream that has some refund requests, and maybe another stream with some account stuff. Cool. Issue custom refund will result in some future stream that will contain refunds to go to customer. And I pull in these streams, and suddenly the question becomes, is this a valid customer? Okay. So I'm using validation because that's the thing we all use everywhere. Well, my point, and it's quite a subtle point, but it's very important, is this a valid customer in this context of issuing refunds? Is a fundamentally different question than, is this a valid customer if I were signing up for a new account or if I were doing other things in the business? And that difference is a business difference, not a programming difference. Mm-hmm. So if I make the typing system reinforce one business feature, then when the type system breaks, I go back to the business user and say, look, hey, you've got some validation rules here. Don't match up these other ones. Is this a conversation you want to have with your boss or amongst yourselves? Or maybe you're just fine with them being different validation rules. That's okay too. Whatever your choice, those are business choices. Those are not data or architecture questions.
Yeah. I like your way of explaining that. That's good. And you also said strong typing within a particular feature, not across features. And the assumption is if you do have independent services, you might even have them in the same programming language. But if you've declared them architecturally that they are actually independent, whether you call them microservices or just a different application, it's a different code base. It could be in a totally different programming language, in which case you're not going to have consistent typing. It's impossible across it anyway.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's a goose chase. We've been doing this wrong all along, and all of us know we have. It's just now you have to sort of say, okay, wait a minute. If I truly want to scale out to like maybe 1 million processors or down to like some guy's cell phone, I've got to sort of throw away some assumptions. This gets back to what we were just talking about, turning things around to a different little angle here. I've got to throw away some assumptions and constraints I thought I had coming in. And one of those is that there will be one ring to rule them all, that somehow I will come up with some sort of master model that will do everything. And it doesn't work for me personally. I can't come up with my own master model of what I'm doing from one function to the next. Not so much expecting a large organization to do that. It's a pipe dream. It's ridiculous.
Right. Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because I always remember that there's a lot of programmers who haven't been through a situation where they realize that different parts of the company have a different definition of, quote, customer, and trying to share a model is, futile. So talk about that a little bit, because a few generations of programmers have gone through the same lesson over and over again. Maybe we can help somebody not make the mistake for themselves.
It's funny because when I make statements like that, people tend to think that somehow I'm throwing out all of computer science, and I'm not. Actually, I'm trying to tell people it's more useful than we thought it was, and I'll explain. We have created these wonderful modeling tools and methods of modeling. You can look at the normal forms of database normalizations, for instance. We've created all these wonderful tools to keep concepts together and how they relate to one another, subclassing, polymorphic dispatch. We've made some cool stuff in programming. Turns out a lot of that stuff is really more useful as a way to help us think about problems than it is about a way to code. Now, maybe you can use it for coding. I'm not saying you can't. But the things like UML modeling of database structures or process analysis using use cases or user stories, a lot of these tools that we used for the guy sitting in front of the box, like shoving code in, actually it's much more useful to look at the code coming out and say, wait a minute, no, customer here doesn't match customer there. And so the computer, as I said to begin with, the computer's telling me something that I need to go do stuff instead of just some new way of me telling it to do stuff. So a lot of the tools we use that we're taught to use are wonderful, wonderful communication language tools that we should use every day. They just don't map directly from a conversation into a compilation. It just doesn't work like that.
You mentioned compilation, and yeah, certainly some people have tried to have shared compiled models across different applications, but I see it, and I want to see if your experience is the same. Even if it was a Node.js, JavaScript application or multiple applications, in some cases, almost most applications do come back to a database of some sort, which has non-null fields, required fields, or it has to be a number, has to be or whatnot. And so if you have a customer table in your database and one of the fields is required, not null, but yet you tell yourself, oh, I have application A and application B, and they're different applications, and yet they have a connection string back to the same database, and both of them are trying to read, write, or update from the customer table. Now, do you agree that's sharing a model?
Yeah. So this the old X-Files show. Trust no one. I mean, I'm serious. That yes, you have to have databases, but yes, you're coupling through the database. Don't bullshit yourself into thinking you're not. Once you start using a persistent data store across places, you're coupling. Now, the trick is not to couple in a way that creates a mess down the road. You just brought up a great example, how you can couple in such a way that you've got one set of customer rules for the database, another set for microservice A different set for microservice B. Don't do that. Don't do that. And I'll tell you why not to do that. We've also been down this road many, many times. There's a reason we have data lakes and data warehouses and data ponds and a data stream inside the data barn by the data horse.
I've got some data puddles.
Data puddles. We get this. We keep doing this thing where we strongly type these databases. The databases don't work together, and so we make this bigger buzzword that then we throw all that crap into, right? And so it's like, no, wait, come on, just give up the coupling at the point where it goes in and out of the database. Doesn't mean you can't write rules of the database. It's a different type of question. Maybe you're asking the business question: what should we persist and when? Perfectly fine, but don't couple that into my business functionality of the microservice I'm running. The microservice should take bad data. It should, give it anything. It shouldn't fail. Never fail. Give me what you got. Okay, fine. I got the answers. No answer because the data doesn't work. But that should be a business discussion because, hey, I'm getting this customer stuff from the source that doesn't match up to your expectations, product owner. What are you going to do about that? And the answer is not more programming.
Right.
It's never more programming. The answer is, okay, well, why doesn't it? Well, because it's not important to have this piece of information up to the point that we need it over here. Okay, well, then you're missing a business process somewhere, aren't you? Because the business would say, hey, I need this piece of information or not. And so what we're doing by creating these larger universal type systems is we're subsuming the business into the code. We're trying to program the people interactions and the people knowledge that exist inside of people's heads. And it's just counterproductive in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I think about the way to explain things and the way to question business process people from the programming team is an important skill. And one of the, you mentioned validation, is one of the ways where I see a lot of programmers say, well, we can't do that, making a statement to a business person, kind of like restricting them, instead of asking, when the user does that, what would you want the software to do? Instead of just telling them, well, you can't do that because they are going to do that. And if you don't plan for it, well, guess what? The software is going to throw an error at the user, which is never the right answer.
And this is frustrating from a lot of angles. Most businesses, rental cars, I don't know, selling telephones, pick a business. Most businesses do not consist of that many different things they do. Right? You get a lead, you make a customer, you maybe make a call, you perform some service, you deliver a product. This is a finite list of things you need to do as a business. And there's consequently a finite list of questions one has around that. What we do by not asking those questions at the right time, we subsume those business discussions inside the tech, and then some simple question like, hey, do you have to have a last name to be a customer? Suddenly becomes I can't print that report for you next Tuesday because whatever, the foreign relation key last name doesn't exist in the lookup field. It's frustrating for the programmer. It's frustrating for the business owner. We've actually made a simple thing much, much more complex, and it makes people quite angry and frustrated.
Yeah. If ever you want to break and you're a architect and a group of business people, just ask them a question. Is such and such field always required? And then just let them argue for the next year, and just because it'll start the conversation going with the business people.
oh my goodness! I had worked with a wonderful Oracle DBA years ago, and he was so smart that you could ask him any technical question you wanted, and he could tell you like a half-hour story about how the business has struggled with the same issue over the years and how they made all these bad decisions, and of course in his mind, and it was exhausting. By the end of his half hour, you're like, oh wow, we really suck, don't we?
Right.
But he was a smart guy, and to him, he had tried to do the right thing all along, and somehow the results didn't work.
Yeah. Man, so many things comes down to figuring out how to ask a question to get the business users or the product managers talking about what their vision really is for the software.
I agree with you. I think the words we use in that question is important. You could just say, hey, you want the computer to do good stuff? And they'll go, yeah, sure. Gotcha.
Right.
But you have to ask more specific questions. Hey, we're signing up a new customer. Should that happen in a tenth of a second or less? Well, yeah, I guess so. So our job as programmers is to begin with sort of these generic questions and sort of narrow them down to something that we can actually create an executable test around it. Once we have an executable test, then we write the code to make that test pass.
Yeah. A lot of times when there's a mutual mystification about what should happen, I like to tell people, wait a minute. Let's pretend computers didn't exist. Let's go back to, let's pick 100 years ago, and we've got paper, and paper's going to an inbox, and somebody has a mail cart walking through delivering stuff.
Yes.
And we're doing this very transaction. Would this be a tap in the telegraph or pick up the telephone and call and directly ask them to do it while you wait for a reply? Or would they fill out the form and put it on the mail cart? Things like
question, yeah.
Just to try to get them to think about what the essence of the process is. Is this a blocking transaction that I have to wait for some to answer? Or is this a submittal type request?
I sometimes will get sort of lost in the woods. We're talking to business owners. I'll say, look, guys, okay, let's do this thought experiment here. I have some bad news. Let's pretend that we've lost all our computer systems, and I'm going to replace that with this little shack here with clipboards in it. Okay. And so now you describe what you want me to do, except for I'm here with clipboards. Do I write things down? Do I get things from other clipboards? How do I know you're happy when we're done our interaction? And that sort of forces them to take the tech out and talk about what they really need to have happen.
Yeah. Because all these businesses could operate not just as well, but they could operate 100 years ago as well.
Yes. And more to the point is that, we really want the people who are doing the requirement, people who are helping us with the business analysis, we want them focused on making the business a better business. That to the degree that we're, lost in the woods talking about, clustered indexes or something, we're actually hurting they're hurting their job, we're hurting the business. We're doing the opposite of what we should be doing.
Yeah. Well, hey, time flies when you're having fun with friends. But let's plug your website, but your show.
Sure.
What channels and what resources can we point the listeners to?
So first of all, I'm up on Discord. It's Nerd Roundup. The links on every one of the articles on the blog, and the blog is danielbmarkham.com. So if you're interested in the conversation, drop by our Discord. We're on there most all the time. I tell people I'm more interested in making 10 new friends a year that we have good technical conversations with than I am selling 1,000 books on how to write better JavaScript or some shit. So come by the Discord. We do tech articles about once a week. We do the Nerd Roundup about once a week. I have 2 books, InfoOps 1, which is about making stuff people want, how to have conversations about what you want, and InfoOps 2, which is about how to do the right thing, how to be a better programmer. Both of those books are very expensive, and it's because I'm using what I call the reverse marketing technique. It's based on Seinfeld. I think one of the Seinfeld shows, George comes in and says, everything I do is wrong. And Seinfeld says, well, how about just do the opposite of what you normally do?
There you go.
And so I raise the price of the books about once a year. Whenever anybody complains, I raise them again. I think right now they're like $128 a piece or something.
And it works, huh?
I'm interested in making friends. I'm pricing the book for me to make friends, not for you to get the book. So This is, if you're thinking about me selling books, you're looking at this the wrong way.
Right.
And we've probably got probably 50, maybe up to 100 people on Discord. So it's coming along. I'm happy with the community we have so far. I'm really interested in having more conversations. So come by and make a friend.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on the Azure DevOps podcast. And we don't just talk about Azure and deep techie bits. We talk all the way up to the philosophy level of how to deliver and ship software.
Hey, let me put a plug in here for you guys. If you're interested in this sort of compilation unit, cloud-based architecture, the Dark Lane guys are doing some cool stuff. Basically, their idea is to take an F# based language and make it run at scale by making it independent of the deployment target. So it is a cloud language.
You said Dark Lang?
Dark Lang. Yep. Paul Bigger.
Okay. We'll make sure to include a link to that. Is it darklang.com?
I think so, yes.
Yeah. Quick Google search or a Bing or a Yandex search, whichever one. All right. Well, awesome. Well, Daniel, thanks for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
You too. Good talking to you, Jeffrey. Have a good one.
Yes, sir. And until next time, keep shipping.
You've been listening to the Azure DevOps Podcast, a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Go to www.azuredevops.show for show notes and other episodes. On behalf of your host, Jeffrey Palermo, and our sponsors, thanks for listening, and may God bless you.